Hello, grade nines, and welcome to lesson 3 of our respiratory system lesson. So let's just give a quick recap of where we left off on the last time. Last time we discussed the trachea as well as the bronchi, and we spoke about how the trachea obviously has the larynx inside, which is the voice box, allows us to speak, and then the trachea has got C-shaped rings of cartilage that keep the trachea open to allow for the movement of air into the respiratory system. And then that is separated by or into the right and left bronchi. And so that's going to distribute the air to the right lung and to the left lung. Today we're going to finish up the structures associated with the respiratory system, and then we'll move on to a little bit of the functionality. And remember, the whole point of this system is to get oxygen delivered to the rest of the system, to the rest of the body, so that we can get oxygen for the process of cellular respiration, so that we can have energy for life. Okay, so yeah, let's move on. Structures this morning. Okay, so just a recap, guys. Trachea, you can see there it is in this illustration, in this picture. Then we've got the right and the left bronchi, and we're going to now speak about the bronchioles and the alveoli today. And then we'll talk about the pleura and the diaphragm associated with that. So if you have a look at this next picture, so this next picture basically just shows you the trachea. So there you can see that single pipe, that's the trachea. It's got those C-shaped rings of cartilage, and then it branches off into the right and the left bronchi, distributing the air to the right and the left lungs. And those then branch off into the bronchioles. Okay, so we've got trachea, then we've got bronchi, and then we've got bronchioles. And you can see in this picture what they've done is they've taken all of these small tubules and we've preserved them. And so you can see that it's absolutely a beautiful illustration of what the lungs look like. So trachea, bronchi, and bronchioles, lots and lots of small branching. And as we have the small branching, we have a decrease in the volume, it increases the pressure inside of the system to allow for gaseous exchange, which is the end process, and we'll talk about that probably next week. Okay, guys. So you can see here we're carrying on with our table. So grade 9s, you need to be making sure that you're copying this table into your workbooks, please. You can see there organs, position, and function. You can copy it by either pausing our video now and then writing down the information, or you can go back to the PowerPoint that I've sent previously and copy it from that. Okay, so let's move on to our next structure. Today we're going to be looking at the bronchioles. Nothing difficult about the bronchioles other than the fact that they do not have any cartilage. And so the bronchi branch off into these bronchioles. And those bronchioles are actually made up of membranes. They're just a soft tissue. So it's not a hard tissue like we saw with the cartilage found in the trachea and in the bronchi. Instead, our bronchioles are just made up of this membranous kind of tissue. And what it does is it transports the air to the alveoli. And when we get to the alveoli is the area where we're going to get the gaseous exchange taking place. So here we can see this picture of the alveoli. If a lot of times people kind of compare it to a bunch of grapes. So if you think about a bunch of grapes, if you're holding the grapes up, you've got the large branch, that would be the bronchi, then that branches off into smaller branches, that would be the bronchioles, then ending off with this cluster of kind of an expansive tissue, the grapes, that would be the alveoli, or a comparison of the structure, just for a visualization, guys. So you don't tell me it's grapes, it's the correct term is the alveoli. So the alveoli is air pockets. They are surrounded by a network of capillaries. So capillaries are the blood vessels. The capillaries are really, really small. So these microscopic blood vessels that are carrying deoxygenated blood to the system to allow for carbon dioxide to be transported to the lungs. So we're going to take that carbon dioxide, we're going to get rid of it, and oxygen, which has been breathed in the air that we breathe in, is going to move into the blood. And so in other words, the blood is now going to become oxygenated. So we're delivering this carbon dioxide, we need to breathe the carbon dioxide out. So we get rid of that carbon dioxide. And when we breathe in, we obviously have air that contains a high concentration of oxygen. And that oxygen is going to move into the blood. So there's an exchange. There's an exchange of these two gases, carbon dioxide moving out of the blood, oxygen moving into the blood. Okay, and how does it exchange at this specific point? Well, there's really, really a thin layer of cells between the alveoli and the capillary wall. So the alveoli are made up of a single layer of cells. The capillary wall is also made up of a single layer of cells. In grade 10 and 11 and 12, we talk about what those specific cells are in terms of the names of those cells and how they adapted. But for grade 9 level, you just need to know it's made up of a single layer of cells on the alveoli and a single layer of cells on the capillary, and the gas can move simply across by a process referred to as diffusion. Now we'll talk more about this specific process next week. So for today, I'm just talking structures. So we've got our bronchioles branching off from the bronchi. So we've got trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, and at the end of your bronchioles, we have the alveoli, and the alveoli are lined with a network of capillaries, of blood capillaries, and gaseous exchange takes place here. Okay, and the alveoli make up the actual lung tissue. And so there you can see that picture of the lungs. We've got the right lung and the left lung. The lungs are a spongy, elastic tissue, so they can expand by the filling in of air, and then they won't completely collapse, but when we exhale air, the volume of the lungs decreases, so they can expand and then they can decrease in size. The right lung consists of 3 lobes, while the left lung consists of 2. The reason for this, grade 9s, is that we have the heart found between the right and the left lung, slightly towards the left-hand side of the body. So the lung is situated between, the heart is situated between the lungs towards the left, and therefore the left lung is smaller than the right lung, only consisting of 2 lobes. The lungs are surrounded by a double membrane. That membrane is called the pleura. And the pleura gives protection to the lungs, and it protects it against friction. The lungs is obviously the place where we have gases exchange taking place. This is the alveoli make up the lung tissue. Okay, guys, we're going to move on to the structures that enable respiration to take place, and then we'll do a little bit of gaseous exchange today. Okay, so you can see at the bottom of the picture, there's this red kind of dome-shaped structure. That is called the diaphragm. So there, the diaphragm, and we're going to speak about how the diaphragm allows for gaseous, not for gas exchange, for inhalation and exhalation to take place. So in other words, the breathing mechanism to actually take place. And then you can see in yellow is the bones that are actually represented there. So the bones, you've got the ribs that are wrapping around, and the ribs make the thoracic cavity. And between each rib, you've got a layer of muscle. Now that muscle is called intercostal muscles, and we'll talk more about that towards the end of this topic when we speak about how inhalation actually takes place. So the diaphragm is a muscle plate or a sheet of muscle that's found between the thorax and the abdominal cavity. In other words, between the thoracic cavity, that would be your chest cavity. So your chest, where your lungs and your heart are found. Then at the bottom of that, we've got the diaphragm. It's a dome-shaped muscle, okay, that can contract and relax to allow for inhalation and exhalation. So this muscle is actually the muscle that brings about inhalation and exhalation. Okay, they work together with the intercostal muscles. So the intercostal muscles are the muscles between the ribs. So we've got the ribs, which are the bones. Between the ribs, we have the muscle, and that allows for you to contract, opening up your thoracic cavity during inhalation. And as I said, we'll speak more about the process of inhalation and exhalation towards the end of the topic. Okay, guys, you're writing this all down in your workbooks. Okay, so grade 9s, if you have a printer available, if you could print this specific illustration. Otherwise, I do have printable material at school. You can speak to Mrs. James about collecting printable material from the office, but you can stick this into your workbooks and you can fully label it. Obviously, from the nasal cavity, mouth, we've got the trachea with the larynx, we've got the bronchi, the bronchioles, and then obviously the alveoli are not illustrated on this specific diagram, and neither is the diaphragm. And so there's some structures missing that you can add. Okay, guys, and so that's it in terms of the structures of the respiratory system. I just want to do a little bit on gaseous exchange quickly, and then that'll be it for this week. Okay, so what is gaseous exchange? Gaseous exchange is, as I said before, the movement of gases into and out of the system. In other words, going into the blood. So we allow for inhalation and exhalation. That is the process of of breathing, physically moving air into the respiratory system and forcing air out of the respiratory system. That's breathing. But what are we actually doing with that air once it's in our system is it needs to be exchanged at the blood. And so gaseous exchange is what's happening at the blood. Carbon dioxide is moving out of the blood while oxygen is moving into the blood. Okay, so guys, you can write this down and let's talk about how the lungs are structurally adapted for gaseous exchange. So we obviously have the alveoli, and that is where gaseous exchange takes place. So these are the air sacs of the lungs. Each alveolus is surrounded by capillaries, and so they're very, very closely related to each other. The alveoli, the wall of the alveoli lies directly against the capillary and allows for gaseous exchange. It's made up of a single layer. So the walls of the capillaries and the alveoli consist of a single layer of cells. This allows for quick diffusion of gases. Oxygen diffuses through the walls of the alveoli and the capillaries and goes into the blood, while carbon dioxide diffuses through the walls of the capillaries and the alveoli into the lungs and then will get breathed out. So oxygen is moving into the blood, carbon dioxide is moving out of the blood and will be ultimately breathed out. And so here we can see this illustration. There is the alveoli and the capillary wall, which has got the red blood cells. So it's carrying red blood cells. The red blood cells are the cell in the body that is responsible for the transportation of oxygen. So when we transport oxygen, oxygen attaches to that red blood cell by a pigment called hemoglobin. So it attaches to that red blood cell and then it gets transported to the body to deliver that oxygen to the whole body so that you could actually allow for cellular respiration. Remember, the process we're trying to do at the end of this is cellular respiration to produce energy. And so there you can see is the alveolus. It's that expanse, that air pocket. So a single alveolus, okay, is aligned with this capillary wall, and there you can see a single layer of cells, and oxygen and carbon dioxide are going to diffuse across this layer over here. So this is where the oxygen is transferred into the blood and carbon dioxide moves out of the blood. And one of the cool things about the lung tissue and about the alveoli is that it has a really, really large surface area. In other words, if we were to take all the alveoli and flatten them out, we could cover the area of a tennis court. And so it's a really large area that allows for this gaseous exchange process to take place. It's a very important concept that there's a large surface area in quite a small area or quite a small volume within our chest cavity. Okay, grade 9s, and the last slide for today. Okay, so just to finish up for today, you can see that we obviously have the alveoli. So it's just another representation of the alveoli with the blood, carbon dioxide moving from the blood into the alveolus, while oxygen moves from the alveolus into the red blood cell. Okay, guys, I think that's sufficient for today. I hope you guys are well, and I'm looking forward to hopefully soon seeing you back in class. But until then, stay safe and keep working hard. Cool, guys. Love you lots. Bye.